All right, let's jump right in. We're going to tackle a massive question today. How does a country actually fall into a civil war? Now, you've probably got this picture in your head of, two organized armies lining up on a battlefield. But I want you to forget that. We're about to explore a whole new way of understanding how a society, when it's pushed to its limits, can suddenly and violently just snap. Yeah, this quote from political scientist Barbara F. Walter, it just nails it, right? The old playbook for civil war is completely out of date. The conflicts we see today are so much messier, they're more chaotic, and they spend a long, long time just simmering under the surface before they ever explode. So the real question for us is, how do you see the danger signs before it's way too late? Okay, so if we're going to understand this new kind of conflict, we need a better map. We have to be able to spot the political warning signs that make a whole society fragile. And that is exactly where the work of Barbara F. Walter comes in. She's basically created a framework for us to spot these risks before a country gets anywhere near its breaking point. So Walter lays out these four key factors, and I want you to think of them less like individual triggers and more like, well, the architecture of risk. When these four things are in place, a society becomes structurally unsound, kind of like a building that's not up to code. It becomes dangerously prone to conflict. So let's break them down one by one. All right, first up, anocracy. It sounds a little technical, but it's basically this really, really dangerous middle ground. It's not a full-on dictatorship, but it's definitely not a stable democracy either. It's stuck in the middle. And in this zone, the institutions you're supposed to trust, like courts or elections, they're just too weak. People stop believing in them. And when different groups start to lose faith in the peaceful process, well, that's when they start thinking force is their only option. The second sign is factionalism. And this is when politics gets deeply personal. It's when things stop being about what you believe, about policy, and it starts being all about who you are, your identity, your tribe. And when politics becomes a battle between racial or religious or ethnic groups, the other side isn't just a rival anymore. They become a threat to your very existence. And how do you compromise with that? You don't. It becomes impossible. Third, and this is a really big one, is status threat. This is this incredibly powerful mix of loss and grievance that a group feels when they used to be on top. It's not just about losing one election. It's this deep fear that their entire culture, their whole place in society, is being wiped out, and there's no peaceful way to get it back. That feeling of complete hopelessness, man, that is rocket fuel for radicalization. And finally, you have elite mobilization. These are the leaders. Walter calls them ethnic entrepreneurs, who step in and pour gasoline on the fire. They actively weaponize all that fear and resentment we just talked about. They build their entire power base by telling their followers, you are victims. The system is rigged against you, and I am the only one who can save you, often by any means necessary. Okay, so we've got the map, right? Walter's given us this brilliant architecture of risk. But here's the thing, that's just the structure. It doesn't explain the energy that flows through it. What's the actual force that takes a country from being at risk to actually physically breaking apart? The political signs tell us what to look for, but we still need to understand how it happened. And to get at that, we need to look at things through a totally different lens. It's a model called BKM in continuity theory. And instead of just politics, I want you to think physics. This model sees a society as a dynamic system, almost like a physical object that can accumulate stress, or what it calls strain, and eventually get bent out of shape. And this brings us to this incredibly powerful idea, residual strain. Here's how to think about it. Every major unresolved issue in a country, deep economic inequality, historical injustices, political humiliation, that tension doesn't just vanish. It gets stored up in the country's collective memory. It's like potential energy in a compressed spring, just building and building and building over time, until the whole system gets rigid and can't take any more shocks. And this comparison right here, wow, it just captures the difference perfectly. Normal, healthy politics, that's like our everyday thoughts, right? You negotiate, you compromise, you let off a little steam here and there in a distributed way. But when a system is overloaded with all this residual strain, its breakdown isn't gradual at all. It's like a nightmare, a sudden, explosive, and totally chaotic discharge of all that pent-up tension all at once. All right, stay with me because this is where it all comes together. We've got Walter's political map of risk on one side and this physics-based idea of social strain on the other. And the real breakthrough, the big aha moment, is when you realize they aren't two competing theories.
They are two different languages describing the exact same process. Let's see how they connect.
This slide right here. This is the key to the whole thing. Let's walk through it. An anocracy isn't just a weak government. In strain terms, it's a system that's lost its shock absorbers. It can't regulate the pressure. Factionalism isn't just identity politics. It's the society physically breaking up into these competing strain clusters, each one storing and amplifying its own tension. That status threat we talked about, that's just the deep, long-term buildup of residual strain inside one of those clusters. And those ethnic entrepreneurs, they're the ignition. They're the spark that synchronizes all that scattered energy and aims it like a weapon.
And of course, in the 21st century, we have this massive accelerant for the whole process: social media. You can think of it like a superconductor for this social strain. It takes fear, it takes outrage, and it just shoots it across the network instantly. It gets millions of people all physically separate, feeling the same intense emotion at the exact same time. It speeds up that journey from tension to rupture like nothing we've ever seen before.
So if we lay it all out, you get this clear 6-step path to rupture. First, you have the background instability in the system itself. Inside that system, people cluster into their identity groups. Then their grievances start to build up over time as this collective residual strain. Then you get the ignition, the leaders who come along and give that anger a target. Social media amplifies their signal 1,000,000 times over. And finally, the system just hits its breaking point. It crosses a threshold and it ruptures into that chaotic discharge we call civil conflict.
Now, I know this can all feel a little abstract, but what if it wasn't? What if you could actually measure this stuff? What if you could create a real-time stress map of an entire society? Well, that is the whole idea behind this concept of the strain token, a way to make all this theory into a practical tool.
A strain token is really just a way to make all this tension tangible. It's a unit of stress that we can actually identify and track. So instead of just saying a country is tense, we could start to say, okay, we're seeing a high concentration of economic strain tokens in this region and a buildup of institutional distrust tokens over here. It lets us actually see where the pressure is building up before the pipes burst. And just look at how neatly these different types of strain tokens map right back to Walter's original 4 warning signs. The institutional strain, like widespread distrust in elections, that is the measurable part of anocracy. The identity strain, that's factionalism in action. The status strain, that's the feeling of status threat. And the narrative strain, all the propaganda and fearmongering, that's the direct result of elite mobilization. See, it all clicks together. We're seeing the political architecture and the dynamic energy as one unified picture. So where does all this leave us? Well, hopefully with a completely new way of looking at this problem. We've moved beyond seeing civil conflict as just a series of bad political decisions. Instead, we can now see it for what it really is, a predictable phase transition, like water turning to steam. It's a fundamental shift in a system that has simply become overloaded with stress. This right here is the ultimate takeaway. Civil war isn't just a failure of politicians, it's a systems failure. It's the moment when the accumulated weight of all a society's unresolved problems, all its stored up strain, becomes so great that the very fabric of that society, its continuity, can no longer hold itself together. It just breaks. Which leaves us with a final, and I think really powerful question to think about. If we can really start to see societal stress as this measurable force, something that builds up in predictable ways, then maybe the most important question isn't just how to predict when a country will break. Maybe the real challenge is figuring out if we can design better ways, social safety valves, to release that pressure safely, long before the system ever has to snap.